Welcome to another episode of The Art of Feminine Negotiation. I'm your host, Cindy Watson, and today I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Virgie Bright Ellington, and we're going to be talking about negotiating to avoid debt in our healthcare system. So welcome, Virgie. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Cindy. Good to see you.
And for our listeners, what's that?
And talk with you. I realize we're on a video call, so it was good seeing you and talking with you.
Absolutely. Yes. And we'll have both of these streaming for people. So for those who don't know Dr. Virgie, she is an internal medicine physician and a medical billing expert. And she's a really determined patient advocate, which caught my attention as someone who's had to go through massive health issues with my daughter when she was born, and more recently with my second born, with my son. It was really caught my interest. Dr. Virgie's practiced more than 20 years in primary care and psychiatric settings, and is a health insurance executive as well. So she's got a few interesting perspectives to bring to the table here. And she now helps patients understand complex medical procedures, to communicate effectively with their healthcare providers, and to avoid financial devastation from crushing medical bills through her What Your Doctor Wants You to Know series. And she's the author of What Your Doctor Wants You to Know to Crush Medical Debt, and the host of a weekly health, wellness, and medical bill show on Voice America Radio Network. So, Virgie, why don't we jump right in? Like, as a longtime medical practitioner, I'd love to hear, like, what triggered your interest in and the move to helping people with medical debt?
Yeah. So, Cindy, you were saying, Virgie, in your bio, you've been a internal medicine physician for years and years, and that's true. So, I've been a board certified internal medicine physician for more than 25 years. I'm dating myself. I shouldn't say those. I keep like more than 20 years. And I was also a publicly traded health insurance, U.S. publicly traded health insurance executive for a decade. And that gave me a complete 360-degree view of the whole U.S. healthcare system, and it's how it works and how it's run, and everything runs on money, right? So I thought how the finances are done for it. I thought I knew it all, or so I thought, until I became a patient and I discovered that my hospital roommate had been taken advantage of, tricked into signing her family's future away forever. They're a very modest income family, and I knew that she had been tricked into what's calling, or agreeing to, I should say, what's called a balance bill, and we can talk about what that is later. Essentially, she's saying that I will agree to pay whatever my insurance doesn't pay, even though this hospital's in network with my insurance.
Wow.
So Cindy, I swear, the curtain dropped.
Yeah.
I saw red. I was so angry and enraged because I knew it had been done deliberately. She was intimidated to do this. They came to her on the day of discharge and said things like, well, before you leave, or before you can leave, sign this.
Wow.
And yeah, exactly. Right. So she's like, oh, okay. She's thinking, well, does that mean I can't leave if I don't sign this? No, the hospital, they cannot hold you hostage. That's a crime. It's a federal crime.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, I just, I was so angry because I knew it was deliberate.
Yeah.
And meaning taking advantage of the 99.9% of folks in the US not knowing our rights, and not having just basic financial, or I should say basic medical financial literacy. So I thought, you know what, Virgie, no, don't get mad. Don't get angry. Get to getting, do something. And that's how Crush Medical Debt was born.
Wow. And how, if it, like, catching people at their most vulnerable too, which makes it even more atrocious, right?
Exactly. Just gets my blood boiling and just makes my stomach churn. It just enrages me, Cindy. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you were a 2-time cancer survivor yourself and got out of significant debt. Are you comfortable sharing that? What impact?
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? That's thank you for asking that. I didn't go into debt. I would have gone into debt if I didn't have basic medical financial literacy. Okay. So the story is, I was sent the same facility that actually I found out later is renowned for doing things that aren't scrupulous in terms of trying to intimidate patients into spending money that they don't owe. And actually, they gotten a colleague in the insurance industry told me that they had been, or I should say in the healthcare administration industry, told me that this particular facility had been fined by the state for doing shenanigans like this. I'm not clear what it was exactly.
Yeah.
But this very same facility that took advantage of my hospital roommate, 6 months about approximately after I was discharged home, I got and Cindy, I laugh a lot, and I say I laugh so I don't cry because
Yeah.
it's like, really? So I got a bill, a snail mail, and I should say a statement. I don't call them bills. 9 times out of 10, they're not real bills. What you get from your large providers, the hospital systems, medical care systems, they're usually 9 times out of 10 not real bills, they're statements. And it said in the upper right-hand corner, and I call that the wishing number because they're wishing and hoping and praying you'll fall for it. They had a number in the upper right-hand corner saying the wishing number that said basically close to, it said patient responsibility, basically $90,000, $89,000 plus dollars, right?
Yikes.
So yeah. And so I'm going through it and it's a statement. They said, oh, there was actually like 3 lines. It said something like, for your OR services, I had to have emergency surgery. For your OR services and staying inpatient in the hospital for a few days, we're charging you $351,000. Second line was something like it had one CPT code. A CPT code is to medical services, what barcodes are to products in a retail store. Every medical service test you can think of, definitely the United States, but mostly the West, uses this. They have each their unique CPT code. Okay, so the second line had a CPT code, 8 something something, 5 digits, or CPT codes are 5 digits. And I recognized it as being the 8,000 series are usually for lab related services. And it said, this is for pathology services. And I know when you have a surgery, if they have to take something out, remove something, they send the pathologist to make sure there's no hidden cancer or it is what they think it is, that kind of thing. So that line was only like $44.95. It was I can't get it out.
Yeah.
And the third line said insurance adjustments / payments, like $260,000. And then the final line at the bottom, again, repeated what they had at the top. Patient responsibility, almost $90,000. And I just cracked up. I just thought this was hilarious. And I had to get it off my chest.
You're lucky.
They didn't realize they were trying to put one over on the author of what your doctor wants you to know to all of that, right? So I tell the story all the time. I had to call my best friend. It was in the middle of a work day. I was going to explode, right? So I told her the story and I explained the issue is that they're trying to balance bill me. It's an in-network provider. And, she said, you know what, Virgie? She said, you're the only one I know who's laughing when everybody else would be crying. So that's the story of if I didn't have this knowledge, this basic medical financial literacy. People think you have to know a lot of stuff, human anatomy, or know how fancy insurance terms. No, that's how I made sure I could have gone into $90,000 worth of debt.
Wow. Now, I know you suggest that most Americans, like even those who have medical insurance, are just like one injury or one illness away from a lifetime of debt. Can you explain that a little bit for our listeners so that they raise their awareness in case a lot of people, until it happens, they don't worry about it. So
yes. So the reason why that's true, Cindy, is because 8 to 9 times out of 10, 80 to 90% of every medical bill generated in the United States have mistakes. And I'm going to say mistakes in quotes, because as we found out in the examples that I gave you, unfortunately, the providers who do this, the billing offices that practice the business side, knows what they're doing. I call them mistakes to be nice, to be just to say, okay, this is what we're going to call it. And these mistakes, if you can imagine, aren't going to be in the interest of the patient, of the American patient, right? If they're going to be in the interest of the provider and or the payer, meaning the insurance company, if you have insurance. So that's why there's a list of 5 things I say you have to look out for, the big 5 quote unquote mistakes. And I call them bill paying mistakes, medical bill paying mistakes, because they're only a mistake because they know what they're doing. It's only a mistake. We don't know better and we pay it. and end up putting ourselves in horrific debt or worse.
Yeah, incredible. Now, what can people do to protect themselves from falling into this kind of crippling debt from medical bills? Because I'm sure a lot of the listeners right now are going, all right, well, you know all this stuff. I don't. So what are some things that they can do to help protect themselves so this doesn't happen?
So the big things I talk about is three things, 3 steps of the only one right way to pay a medical bill. There's only one right way to pay a medical bill. And that is to make sure that you're understanding what services you received, but most importantly, what they're charging you for. And then to make sure you're not falling into some of the common mistakes. So 3 things, 3 steps. Step 1 is calling and asking for a real bill. I mentioned earlier with my case, I recognized right away it wasn't a real bill. Well, Virgie, what's a real bill? A real bill is, quote, something with CPT codes, unquote. And as I said earlier, CPT codes are to medical services what barcodes are to products in a retail store. And you take a product, you run it through the scanner, and 2 things pop up. You get a brief description of the product, and then you get the price that that particular retailer is charging for it. So what you're going to do is every time you get a bill, you're going to look at it and make sure that it's a real bill. 9 times out of 10, I'd say even more than that, it's not going to be. So just under that usually in the upper right-hand corner, underneath, they always have questions. Call our billing department or call our patient accounts department. You're going to call that and you're going to say, yes, I need help. I need, quote, something. I received a statement. Don't call it a real bill.
Yeah.
I received a statement and I need something, quote, I need something with CPT codes, unquote.
Yeah.
And what you'll get in the snail mail is they'll send it in by mail. Snail mail is a list of the date of service that the procedures happened or whatever happened, all of the services happened, and by each one, the CPT code. And then you can take it to step 2 and plug those CPT codes into an internet search. Google basically the CPT codes for each service. Up will pop up the short description of the service that you're being billed for. Make sure that it is something that sounds like the services your physician told you that you received, your surgeon or your doc told you that you received, to make sure you're not getting double billed. That happens. Duplicate billing happens a lot. And to make sure, unfortunately, you're not getting upcharged, upcoded is what it's called. So you go into the emergency room, you had an accident, you were skiing and you bumped into something, you're away on vacation and you, oh my gosh, it turns out you have an arm fracture. So you're away, but you're only like 4 hours away from home. The ER doc says, you know what? The orthopedic surgeon says you should probably have surgery to set this, but you can have it closer to your home. We're going to put you in a sling and send you home. You go home and set up surgery sometime when you get home next week. But a month later, you get a bill and the CPT code describes, you plug it in and it describes humeral fracture intervention. Well, that doesn't sound like a sling. And it's not. It is like setting it or a real intervention, like some kind of surgery. So that's why you need to have step 1, the CPT code, so you can take it to step 2 to make sure that it is actually the services that you received. And while you're there Googling the CPT codes, Google what Medicare pays for each of those codes. Now, people automatically, Cindy, will hear Medicare and they'll just tune out and they'll say, well, Medicare, that's for old people. That has nothing to do with me. Well, okay. So Medicare is basically federal health insurance. And yes, it's federal health insurance, mostly initially conceived to cover folks over the age of 65 who don't have health insurance by an employer. And it's also for folks that are much younger who have chronic disabilities, certain diseases, or chronic issues. But the point is that this is the federal government's insurance. And what they pay for each service is considered the basic retail price, the lowest fair price for medical services. That's the key. And then you're going to go to step 3. You're going to total up all of the CPT codes and what Medicare pays for them. So you have the most fair, basic, lowest price for each medical service. and you're going to total it up, call back the billing department and say, hey, yeah, I got a statement from you guys and it said you're charging me $10,000. But in my case, I am willing, quote, I am willing and able to pay, and a hypothetical example I use all the time, $3,000, unquote. Who can I speak with who can help me make a payment plan, an interest-free payment plan?
Yeah.
And so I talk about this a lot, and we can talk about, negotiating and words and that kind of thing. But rule number one, I say, when you're talking to folks, and what we're doing is negotiating, even if, we can talk about, socialization, women were not socialized to think of ourselves as negotiating. We're thought of as something that's not friendly or nice. But, you can't get blood from a stone. It is what it is. And we can show teeth and smile sweetly and say, this is what I have. This is what I'm willing and able to pay. End of story. You're negotiating every single medical bill when you do this.
Yeah. And how successful are people at that? Like, what happens if you get resistance from them, or what's your experience around
great.
that?
Thank you for asking that, Cindy. So there's a couple of places where you're going to get resistance most often. First, step one is when you call the billing department, they may say, and you ask for a real bill quote, something with CPT codes, unquote, you're often going to get pushback at that very first step. And you're going to hear something like, well, we don't have that kind of information here, or you're going to have to call your insurance for that information. And then you're going to say, okay, all right, let me try it again. I need something with CPT codes as per HIPAA federal law, unquote.
Yeah.
And so people think of HIPAA, the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act. I think it's the last A, the first A is accountability. I have to remember that. But the point was, people think of it as the privacy law. And actually, that was a side piece. The point was to make information available for people to take all of their healthcare information from one provider and from one insurance company to the next without having to say, okay, well, how can I get it? Or not be held hostage and say, you have to pay us, you have to pay off all your debt before you can. No. By HIPAA federal law, you are entitled to, you own every piece of information related to care you were provided by a medical provider. And that includes each piece of financial information generated from those services. So if you get pushback after that, the thing is that most of the frontline folks are trained to say, okay, all right, we'll figure it out. Who can I speak to who can help me get a quote unquote something with CPT codes as per HIPAA law, unquote, because the fines, it's a violation of civil rights, and you file a complaint with the Federal Office of Civil Rights for violating that. And there's just no provider that wants to deal with, they don't want to be a test case for violating HIPAA.
And let me I want to stop and put a pin in that for a sec, because for our listeners out there, I find I'm really glad we're digging into this, because this is a problem I think that people face all the time, whether dealing with insurance companies as well. I see claim denials for, I remember having a case once when somebody had been diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, and the insurance company said inadequate medical information, just deny. And similar with the hospitals. I know in the situation with my son, they were constantly trying to pass the buck. It is preposterous for the hospital to suggest that you need to go to your insurer to get information about the billing that the hospital put out.
They generate. Exactly.
It's there. It's so ask for and really get comfortable in your own skin, getting a little more assertive. And that's not aggressive. You don't have to get in their face, but just having the confidence that comes from knowledge. And that's why I thought it was so important to have Virgie here today to explain some of those rights that you have, so you can, with confidence, just keep pushing back a little bit. You can be super polite about it, whatever your style is, and we'll talk about style in a moment, but just to make sure that you are, when you get that no, and they try and put you off, to make sure that you know what your rights are, to keep insisting. And just, well, as a side note on that, I use that all the time. If you go to a hotel, frankly, and you ask for a king size bed and you had booked a king size bed and they tell you, I'm sorry, Ms. Watson, we don't have any king size beds. I never accept that. And I got to tell, I can't think in all the many years that I have traveled when they have said, don't have it, don't have it. Some of them really resist. I've checked everything, Ms. Watson, we don't have it. And I'm like, then I'd like to speak to your manager, please, if you don't mind. They always suddenly find a king size bed in the hotel room, right? So just
oh gosh, one just came up. Okay, wait, hold on a second. Oh yeah, I found one. Yes, we have one here.
So
Yeah,
at
and
this, when the stakes are so high,
yeah.
be sure that you are advocating for yourself. So sorry to cut you off before you went to your next point.
No,
Put
please,
a pin in
no
that.
need to apologize. Thank you for bringing that issue. And Cindy, I want to go back to something that you said. It is being assertive and not aggressive.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between, I have a cousin who I just think I just talk about her. I can't believe how ignorant she is, but she'll and
Ignorant is in not knowing, or ignorant is in rude?
Yes, both.
Both. Okay.
Both. Right. And I said, I'm assertive, not aggressive. And she says, well, it's the same thing. I'm like, no, you're ignorant. That's not true. Look it up. Don't just take my word for it. Look it up. Assertive is essentially advocating for your rights. Aggressive is denying and pushing over other people's rights. And so when we're being assertive, Cindy, and thank you for bringing up this issue, and thank you for doing what you do by talking about this issue, we have to be assertive, because if we're not, we are denying our own rights.
Absolutely. I love that distinction. I haven't heard it put that way before, Virgie. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the first thing. The first pushback you're going to get is in the first step. And then this is the step that people are really afraid of getting pushback on. And the third step, that's the third step, which is where you say, you know what? I know you sent me a bill for $10,000, but in my case, I am willing and able to pay $3,000. In your head, you're like, holy crap, they're not going to accept this. That's and yes, they've been trained, they meaning the front desk staff that are staffing the billing offices or patient accounts departments, the customer service reps that you're speaking with on the phone, they've been trained to say, yeah, sure, they're going to be trained to push back. They're going to say, well, you know what? That's a lot of money. And even if we were able to give you an interest-free payment plan, let's say you can only afford, yes, $3,000, but this was an emergency. This couldn't happen at the worst time. I only have, you can't get blood from a stone. I can only squeeze out $50 a month out of my budget. So I can only pay, I need a payment plan, an interest-free payment plan of $50 a month until the $3,000 is paid off. And in your head, you're probably thinking, holy crap, are they going to get, it's going to take me forever to pay that off. And they may say, oh, you know what, ma'am, that's going to take us forever to get our money. We took care of you, or your loved one. You really need us. Yes. And I really appreciate it. And I can only pay $50 a month. And yes, it's going to take me 60 months to pay that off, 5 years.
Yeah.
And right. The reason why you're going to stick to your guns, Cindy.
Yeah, I love this.
Is because they know that you are, number one, you're being proactive. You're not hiding from the bill. You're reaching out to them and saying, this is what I can do for the services that I received. I owe you this, and I'm making arrangements to pay it. And two, they don't have to spend money to chase you.
Yeah.
You're being proactive. You're coming to them. They don't have to sell it on pennies on the dollar to a debt collector to get just resources to get income or cash flow. Yeah. They know that they're likely to get actually more money if they agree to that, instead of having to send it to debt collectors for literally pennies on the dollar. So that's why you're going to stick to your guns when, not if, when you get pushback from the payment plan you're able to make.
Yeah. And again, I want to stop you for one sec to put a pin for our listeners. Notice that distinction when Virgie said there, when, not if. So it helps with that mindset piece when you go in expecting that there's going to be resistance. So prepare yourself for showing up and get yourself into a state where you're going to be comfortable knowing that the resistance is coming and that you've got these answers in your pocket already, that you're going to stick to your guns and say, be appreciative, be respectful. I so appreciate what you did for me. And I love that word, that instead of but, and this is all I can do, and just keep repeating that. So back to you, Virgie. Sorry, I just want to put a pin in that.
Please don't apologize, but Cindy, thank you for bringing up the issues and the tips and reminders on how to get this done, how to implement this, right? It's one thing to have the knowledge, but knowledge without action is nothing.
Yeah.
So absolutely, thank you for bringing it up. Please practice what you're going to say. You may decide, okay, I'm someone who likes to write. There are people that like to journal, they like to write. So write everything that you're going to say, write possible questions and, or maybe just write your answers and then practice them. When you're calling to ask for, quote, a real bill, something with CPT codes, unquote, or when you're calling to say, you know what, dude, this is all I got. I know.
And if you're uncomfortable, actually role play. Like, I love this idea.
Yes.
I'm a big advocate of practice as well. And people, we don't do it enough. So prepare for this when you're going in. Practice with a loved one. Practice in front of the mirror at first, but ideally get somebody to practice with who is going to ask them to push back so that you're comfortable, because you're not going to then be that deer in the headlights at the time. You're going to feel much more comfortable in your own skin as you push that. Now, Virgie, you had mentioned before about I think you said 5 medical money mistakes or something. So I imagine we've heard about a few already, but I just want to make sure that we cover that. What are these 5 medical money mistakes that most people make?
So the 5 medical money mistakes are, number 1 is being a non-negotiator.
Yeah.
All medical bills generated in the United States are negotiable. No matter how big or small, all medical bills are negotiable. And 8 times, let's just be conservative, 8 times out of 10, they probably have mistakes, or they're asking you to pay more than you should or more than you actually owe. So that's the first number 1 money mistake, medical money mistake we're making. 2 is that you're a care qualifier. In the United States, I'd say 65%, last number I saw, most hospitals and medical care systems are quote unquote nonprofit.
Yeah.
Now, I don't call them nonprofit because they're just as aggressive and nasty or more than for-profit institutions and coming after you to make sure their revenues are protected. I call them tax exempt because that's what they are. Okay. They are in exchange for tax exempt status, which means they don't pay a dime on tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. They are to provide a sliding scale income-based discount in the communities, or to patients in the communities in which they operate. Yeah. So not knowing that you went to check and see if the institution you went to that's sending you the bill, after you do the 3 steps, say, okay, wait, and they're nonprofit, let me ask for and they all have to provide one to you, an application for, they call different names, financial assistance, financial aid, charity care, but it's just basically all different names for sliding scale income-based discount. Yeah. And don't think, last thing about that's the second medical money mistake, is that don't think because you have a high income, you make, $100,000, $150,000 that you're not going to qualify. Sometimes your bill is so high that in relation to your income that it can be, according to their sliding scale, can be wiped clean. Yeah. So it can happen. Yeah. Great. So number 3 medical money mistake is that you are credit crushed, meaning you put your bills, you paid for your medical bills with a credit card, or you took out a loan, or God forbid, a HELOC, a home equity line on your credit, or took out a second mortgage on your home. Oh my gosh, no. Yeah. And that's because 2 things you don't want to do that is because I call it, dance with the one that brought you to the party, right? So if you take the medical bills away from who gave it to you, meaning you're not making a direct relationship, or I should say payment plan, with the facility that gave you the service, what you're doing is you're turning it into, by putting it on a credit card, even a medical credit card, you're putting it you're taking it away from the special protections that we have for medical bills and medical debt. It becomes a regular consumer debt, which means that you don't get the special protections. Like if once you pay it off, it falls off your credit report. It gets reported to your credit report, first of all, which your payment plan with facilities do not get reported to credit agencies.
Okay.
So that's what I mean by that's what I mean by credit crushed. And the thing is, the interest rates, if something happens and you can't make the payments, and that, the medical credit cards are saying, oh, it's interest free for 2 years. Well, if something happens and you can't finish it all in 2 years, the interest rates are astronomical and you're stuck. So that's step 3. Step 4, or I should say not step 4, but the number 4 medical money mistake is you're dubiously denied. And what that means is that your insurance, if you have insurance, denied coverage for care that you should have gotten. The most common thing that happens, Cindy, is that you had an emergent service, you had to go to the emergency room or had to have emergency transportation, emergency care, and it gets denied as non-emergent. So that's why you want to get those 3 steps. Got to, I tell people that first step, asking for a real bill and checking the CPT codes, takes away a lot of foolishness that happens when these bills are just crazy stuff that's done to folks. And then last but not least, we talked about it at the top of our discussion, is number 5, is that you were double dealed. So you were balance billed, which means that if you have insurance and you went to an in-network facility or an in-network provider, you are told, hey, you had this service and your insurance only pays $10, but we charge $100. So here's the bill for the remaining $90. And that's, you see, it seems like a crazy number, but those ratios are not unusual, unfortunately. So they're saying you owe us the balance. And you're like, no, that's contract fraud. That's, you have the providers have signed a contract saying that they will accept in exchange for having access to their millions, sometimes hundreds of thousands to millions of members, that they will give them a discount. And they will say, for our members, what they're paying for in their premiums is access to a discount. And you got to give it to them. You signed a contract, dude.
I love that you're mentioning that. I was going to circle back to that about your situation, about that balance difference. So thank you for circling back to that on your own. And I also want to circle back and just put a pin again in that idea about that insurance denials. Most know what they're doing. They make millions of extra dollars a year, perhaps in the multi-millions extra, by denying claims that on bases that they know are not really supportable, but because most people won't fight back, won't even ask, won't advocate for themselves. So do advocate. And it's worth saying as well that you've got legal advice sometimes, because they don't want to have to go to litigation. It will cost them more to litigate.
Cost them money. Exactly.
Cost them more to litigate. And I had a case recently where somebody came in and I said, you know what, let us write a letter. You don't want to be litigating this either, but let us just write a letter. They had denied. He had been advocating for himself. And it took one simple letter for us, a half hour work for the lawyer, send off the letter. And again, in our law practice, so we just sent off a letter saying it's untenable, the denial, blah, blah, blah. Please send us the full file. The next day he got a call and they allowed his claim. So definitely.
Oh gosh. Oh, we missed that. Oh, sorry. Our mistake. Yeah,
exactly.
Those kind of responses. Yeah.
Now, what suggestions do you have for people who can't afford health insurance?
Oh, great question. Thank you for bringing that up. So there's a couple of things this is the thing. I do recommend that you get some kind of insurance, meaning insurance is for catastrophic issues, for things that you can't afford, that'll really devastate you. So that's why we have car insurance. Not, we drop it we drop the collision part if the car is only like worth $1,000, but we have that because it protects us and other people if there's a large claim related to expenses, I should say, related to an accident. Also, homeowners insurance. If, I did this once when I was a kid, I threw a ball and broke the window. well, was my dad going to hit the home insurance claim for that? No, he's going to pay the $100 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It may be even, $200, whatever it is, to replace the window instead of hitting his homeowner's insurance, because that's not what homeowner's insurance is for. God forbid, a fire, that kind of thing, or a flood. So when you go to your local appliance store and they say, hey, for your new stove or your new TV, do you want to sign up for a protection plan? Well, that's insurance. No, you don't, because it will suck. You don't want to pay the $500, $600, but it won't devastate your financial future. That's what insurance is for. Same thing with health insurance in this country, in the United States, I should say, in that you want to get something. So if you're under the age of 29, you can get through the federal marketplace, what they call Obamacare, or the ACA, Affordable Care Act. You can qualify for, with that age, for catastrophic insurance. So no, if you get a broken arm, that sucks. Life sucks, accidents happen, life happens. But if God forbid you end up in a hospital, you have to be inpatient for days, or a horrible accident, multiple surgeries, that's something that you would be covered for without having to pay the high premiums that are unaffordable to folks. That's the big thing I recommend. The other thing you may want to do, if you cannot afford the premiums in the federal marketplace, meaning Obamacare, then think about, just don't go bare. Just don't run around flapping in the breeze, Cindy. Let's say that you're hanging out your own shingle, you're really starting your own business, and you are leaving your employers, so that means you don't have employer covered insurance, but with the premiums now on your own, you can't afford it. At least go to, you look and you decide, oh my gosh, I still can't afford it, even through the ACA, the Obamacare, the bronze, silver, gold, or platinum levels. Okay, then look into critical illness insurance or accident insurance, something that you'll get a payout if, God forbid, something happens and you have bills covered for being, paying your bills for not being able to work, and covering the medical bills. So that's what I suggest you do when you are saying, you know what, I just can't afford the monthly premiums that are out there for regular health insurance.
Okay, beautiful. Some great tips here. My gosh. And one thing when you said about in the US, I want to say for all of our listeners out there, a lot of these principles are going to apply regardless of what country you are in. So check the relevant sort of rights that you have within your jurisdiction as well. And a little message for our Canadians out there, we are seeing this real shift. I mean, Canada has always had a healthcare system that the rest of the world looked up to and admired. And we're seeing a lot of cutbacks in healthcare, where they're looking to sort of almost create a healthcare crisis so that people will start asking for a privatized system. So I do invite you to advocate to make sure that you protect the healthcare system that we have. And that's another aspect of negotiating in terms of this healthcare, whether you're in a country where they've got insurance or a country that's supposed to have the funding. Make sure you protect that. Make sure you protect that funding. I know many of you know our daughter had to have open heart surgery when she was only 2 months old. We spent 3 months, almost just shy of 3 months, in critical care. And it would have devastated us. I remember being stunned when I heard what the costs were to be in critical care for a day, let alone for almost 3 months. So protect those rights that we have. And Virgie, you've given us such great tips here today. I can't believe how quick our time has gone. I normally end by asking, what is one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've had in your life? Doesn't have to be on this issue at all. Just one of those moments that changed the way you think about something and how you show up in life.
Oh, that's a great question, Cindy. You know what? Really, at the end of the day, it goes back to something that you brought up earlier, the difference between being assertive and aggressive. Meaning assertive, you make sure that you advocate for your rights. Aggressive is bowling over and destroying other people's rights, someone else's rights. But if you are not assertive, you're destroying your rights. No one's going to do it for you. At the end of the day, you have to be assertive for yourself. Learn to be assertive and protect your rights.
I love that. I think that's a great message. And that applies across the board for all our listeners and viewers out there in every aspect of your life. Make sure that you are negotiating to get what you deserve in life. Negotiate to get those best outcomes. Negotiate to have your best relationship. Make sure you are asking for and advocating for what you want, what you need, and also that reciprocity to get that kind of open communication to be able to have those all important dialogues so you can negotiate your best life. So thank you so much, Virgie. I know even I love the messaging that you gave us. Loads of valuable information here. Tell our audience again the name of your book so that, and we'll make sure to put it in the show notes.
I tell people just remember, crush medical debt. The actual name of the book is what your doctor wants you to know, to crush medical debt, but this is too much of a mouthful, hard to remember. Just crush medical debt. And you can find that anywhere where you can buy your books, and at crushmedicaldebt.com.
Perfect. Perfect. And we'll make sure to put that in the show notes, as I say, and you can learn more about Dr. Virgie as well on various social media at The Real Dr. Virgie. So we'll also put that in the show notes. Make sure you check that out. And thank you so much for being here. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Cindy, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it talking with you.
And for our listeners out there, I have zero doubt that you got loads of value from this episode. There were all kinds of really hot, practical tips, concrete things that you can apply to help make sure that you are negotiating to stay out of debt and get the health care that you are entitled to. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already done that. And make sure to share this episode in particular with all of your friends as well. I was going to say with anyone you think you could get some value, but everybody really could use these lessons. Most people just have a complete lack of awareness around this issue, and it can be devastating when yourself or a loved one end up needing significant medical care. So, and before we sign off, just want to share some ways we can work together. If you're looking to up-level your negotiation skills, I've got everything from online to group to my signature mastermind and VIP experiences to help you better leverage your innate power so you can get more of what you want and deserve in life. And if that sounds interesting, check out artoffemininenegotiation.com. And on that, make sure to grab my book if you haven't already, The Art of Feminine Negotiation, How to Get What You Want from the Boardroom to the Bedroom. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until next time, take care.